Hello everyone, my name is Prina Parada and today I will be talking about how recycling impacts the environment. So it is first important to note why recycling is even an option when it comes to protecting our environment, and this is widely due to global warming. So if you aren't too sure what causes global warming, it is widely caused by greenhouse gas emissions. And greenhouse gas emissions come from humans burning fossil fuels for electricity, heat, and transportation. There are a number of different fossil fuels, including methane, nitrous oxide, other fluorinated gases as well, but I'm going to be specifically focusing on carbon dioxide. And so, what does this cause whenever we burn fossil fuels and release these greenhouse gases into the atmosphere? It causes something known as the greenhouse gas effect. And the greenhouse effect is explained here on the right in simple terms with this illustration. And when the solar radiation passes through the clear atmosphere, most of the radiation is absorbed by the Earth's surface and it warms it. Some of the radiation is reflected back by the Earth in the atmosphere and it goes back into space. However, some of it is absorbed and re-emitted in all directions by the greenhouse gas molecules present in the atmosphere, and this effect directly warms the Earth's surface and the lower atmosphere's temperature as well. So this graph here just shows the carbon dioxide levels in the atmosphere over the past 800,000 years in parts per million. And as you can see, it fluctuates relatively consistently up and down from 800,000 years ago to about 100,000 years ago, with the previous highest concentration being around 300 parts per million. But you can see at the end of the graph, when we get to 2019, the average has jumped from 300 to around 409.8. And this level is actually probably bigger today in 2020, but we are not expecting it to drop back down anytime soon. So this graph on the right shows the total U.S. greenhouse gas emissions by economic sector in 2018. And you can see here that there are three prominent groups represented by transportation, electricity, and industry, as well as commercial and residential and agricultural. However, those are much smaller. So the industry sector specifically, written on the EPA's website, says that including both direct emissions and indirect emissions associated with electricity use, the industry's share of total U.S. greenhouse gas emissions in 2018 was 28.9%, making it the largest contributor of greenhouse gases of any sector. And total U.S. greenhouse gas emissions from industry, including electricity, have declined by 16.1% since 1990. So this is very important to note because you can actually see that with electricity use playing a factor as well, that industry becomes the largest economic sector of greenhouse gas emissions for this year, which was 2018. And a lot of the reductions seen since 1990 are due to more efficient energy use. A lot of large companies have began switching to fuels that release less carbon. However, they're still releasing carbon in the first place, so it's still not a great alternative. But the third thing is recycling, which can play the biggest role in this because individuals are able to easily do it, and it directly decreases the energy needed to make new materials. So there's going to be less fossil fuels burned in order to create the materials needed. So for my experimental design, I want to conduct an experiment in which I use different levels of recycling incentives in the same community at different time periods to see how frequently the people will recycle. So for trial 1, there will be no extra incentive. There will just be a recycling center that is open to the public where people will need to drive to and sort their own materials. In trial 2, there will be a recycling pickup bi-weekly included with the trash service, and for trial 3, there will be a weekly recycling pickup included with their trash service. So what I'm going to do is collect the data by weighing the total recycled materials of each group and convert it into how much carbon dioxide it would emit based on weight. And I found this conversion factor from the Environmental Protection Agency website, and it states that there are 2.94 metric tons of carbon dioxide equivalent per ton of waste recycled instead of landfilled. So a little bit more in depth on my variables. The control group is obviously where there is no added incentive to recycle. This is the public recycling center where people would have to drive and sort their own goods if they choose. My independent variables are group 1 and 2 that have the added incentives of either weekly or bi-weekly recycling included with their trash service. And the dependent variables are the total weight of recycled materials in each group, as well as the carbon dioxide emission equivalent to producing the new materials. And the hypothesis that I'm going to be testing is that more people will recycle more materials with increased access and incentive to recycling services, therefore lowering the total carbon dioxide emissions of the industry sector. So after completing the experiment, this is a graph that shows the different trials. Trial 1 is in blue, trial 2 is in red, and trial 3 is in yellow. And I put them all in the same graph here, so it was very easy to tell which groups did better and which groups did worse. So as you can see, for group 1, the blue group, there was the lowest average of recycling materials by weight. And in group 2, you can see that it moved up slightly. All of them were larger by week than the first trial. And for group 3, you can see the greatest difference. There was much more weight recycled whenever recycling was provided to people weekly with their trash service. And this chart shows a weight of recycled materials in pounds to tons ratio. So the first bar represents trial group 1, the second bar represents trial group 2, and the third bar represents trial group 3. And as you can see here, there was 411 pounds collected for trial 1, which equated to about 0.2 tons. For trial 2, there was 758 pounds of recyclable materials collected, which equated to about 0.4 tons. And for group 3, there was 1,360 pounds of recycled materials collected, which equated to about 0.7 tons. And so altogether, there was a total of 2,529 pounds of recycled materials, which when converted into tons equals 1.2645. And using the conversion factor, I found that the data I collected shows a 3.72 metric tons of carbon dioxide were prevented from being released into the atmosphere by people recycling. So overall, the results showed that Group 2 had a higher total weight collected than Group 1, and Group 3 showed a higher total weight collected than Group 2. So the results showed that my hypothesis was supported by this experiment. And here are some of my references. If you have any questions, please let me know.